I've been in the nonprofit world for most of my adult life, since my late 20s, doing a variety of things. Science, Children's Science Museum director, taught at Cal Poly, taught at Cuesta, taught at Allen Hancock College, for about 11 years, 15 years total teaching. And now you can do the numbers, but I'm in my 22nd year of working for what used to be called Central Coast Salmon Enhancement, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. And I'm super interested in what these guys are doing because, again, we know so little about, we know a lot about what their history probably has been in our watersheds, but what we don't know is how to bring them back effectively with people, with public lands, with public water. There is no such thing as private water, by the way, and how all those pieces fit together. Now, I've been told that there's a camera here and I'm supposed to stay somewhere nearby, but I'm a wanderer, so I apologize in advance to the Zoomers that I might wander away. So I'm going to give you a general overview of our coastal creeks, maybe. And I am really not technologically savvy, so I don't know where to look. I'll look at you and hope that it all works out. And we work from Ventura to Monterey, and you'll see an example of projects that we've worked on. And we're unique in a way to our region in that we use science to help make decisions on the policy realm and in the restoration realm. So we are a little bit different than, we're a lot like the Morro Bay National Estuary Program. We do a lot of assessment, we do designs, we bring, and probably what makes us different from a lot of groups here is that we bring stakeholders to the table to help us make those decisions. You have a question?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could we maybe get 2 minutes on who exactly and what Creeklands is?
Sure, I'm going to get there.
Say we.
Yep, I'll get there. First, our mission, while I talk and you read, maybe not, doesn't matter to me, but we'll get there, I promise. We started a Central Coast Salmon Enhancement in 1983, and we were rebranded a few years ago as Creeklands Conservation. The only project that the group did was in aquaculture in those days, and they raised salmon in Avila Bay till 2007 and added millions of fish to the ocean fisheries. Since then, or I should say when steelhead were listed, we started to do watershed restoration work in the uplands, not the marine area. So habitat restoration, education, I'll talk a little bit about our citizen science and education programs. And we really were using and still are using steelhead trout as the focal iconic species to do this restoration route. We know, though, that when we do restoration for steelhead, we do things for other critters too. So we use those because they are iconic. Any fishers in the audience? Couple, do you ever catch a steely? Anybody? Okay. Downstream of the last bridge, you know, before you get to the ocean, that's the legal in certain months. And it's catch and release. You can't keep them anymore because they're threatened here. Today, our volunteer scientists and partners are the backbone of regional conservation efforts to restore and strengthen the vitality of our ecosystems. We know that droughts and deluges are a part of our climate future. We know that water usage by agriculture is tremendous. We need to eat. We also know from the data that we've collected is low stream flow and high water temperatures threaten California's native fish. So what do? What land uses do our creeks run through? What land uses besides ag? What? Rangelands where cows have free range sometime? Yeah. What about that fencing? What about those water troughs? What other land uses? Urban. San Luis Obispo, city of classic urban stream. How do we deal with flood flows effectively? Where we have built and the creek is now underneath a building. We call it the tunnel. We actually did some feasibility to figure out how to do fish passage through that confined space. Not going to talk about that one today, but that is an urban example of how to deal with our creeks. What other land uses? Yeah, in the uplands, in the oak woodlands. What else? So we've got ag, usually in the bottomlands. Pardon?
All
pavement from which all sorts of nasty vehicular drippings run off.
Yeah, those impervious surfaces. And I know Brock and Kate, who you'll hear from later, you know, it's the slow it, sink it, spread it, share it mantra that we really are going to use more and more as we go forward. It kind of got started in the stormwater world, but many of us have adopted it for lots of reasons, particularly the floodplain reasons that somebody brought up earlier. Any other land uses, ag, urban, recreation. We do not have waters that we can recreate in our county other than the beach. Fresh water, surface water is not recreation worthy, even though you might go into the saliness. You're taking your chances. If you go into an estuary, you're taking your chances. Even our beaches have warnings certain times of the year after the first flush. It may not be safe to be in our water. I just looked at the Beaver Brigade website yesterday, again, to refresh myself, and there's a great new initiative, the drinking water initiative coming out of the Beaver Brigade, a 200-year goal. That's what we need, that vision of getting them swimmable, fishable, and even drinkable. So those are a little bit about what's going on in our watersheds in terms of the land use. What's going right? Is anything going right besides the Beaver Brigade? Woo! The Klamath right now. Those dams are coming out. J.C. Boyle in the last week, Iron Gate the week before that. Awesome. What else is going right? What else can we celebrate?
All the open space around San Luis Obispo.
We have an
The East Coast,
incredible.
It's like where the mini McMansions, mini farms all throughout all your suburban ag lands, the adjacent ag lands. It's like incredible.
You have some very progressive decision makers in the city of San Luis Obispo and have had for about 30 years. And so the open space areas around the city are remarkable. What else are we doing right? And we work with the city, by the way, quite closely. Any other great
Cows, not condos.
cows, not condos? Yes. And if cows ate algae, guess what? They'd produce how much less methane in their farts and belches?
The Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary makes resources available for watershed protection efforts, and that might also be available to a whole lot of other watersheds with the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, especially if it occupies the entire area and all of the watersheds that people have been working on for decades.
Yes, and some of the land back projects that are going on right in our county now with our local tribes. Very interesting stuff. It's about time, right? Okay, what else is going right? And then we'll go to the wrong. 'Cause there's a lot of that.
Groundwater pumping.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And we won't spend a lot of time on groundwater. We don't actually work in groundwater a lot, but surface water and groundwater interact. And I can go on and on, you know, a whole class for a whole semester about that. We won't do that. But that is an interesting piece of forward motion. Now for the bad stuff. What's not going right? Leads us to what we do, which is watershed conservation based on conservation science, restoring habitats, augmenting stream flows, improving fish passage, and as I said earlier, stakeholder work with collaborating with all kinds of groups on watershed planning. Here are just some of the watershed plans we have worked on, and they are stakeholder driven, which means we bring people around the table who aren't used to dealing with policy, regulation, land use jargon. They have homes and they have businesses and they have economic needs. And we're saying in a watershed stakeholder driven process, how can we work together to meet your needs, stakeholders, and also meet the needs of the folks who are doing this for habitat restoration? How can we have the fish and the frogs and the cows and the beavers essentially working together to bring about a different economic paradigm than we've ever had here on the Central Coast? So all the way from Nipomo down to Ventura. Somebody is here from Cambria. The Santa Rosa Creek Watershed Management Plan was completed about a decade ago. Same with Big Sur. In-stream flow study in Santa Maria. I'll have a little bit more to say about Santa Maria in a minute. So lots and lots of stakeholder input in these plans over time. And the plans are being implemented in all of these communities as opportunity, funding and interest arises. And here are a few of the projects. I'll tell you a little bit more about each of, no, not all of them. But I wanted to focus on the one in the orange box because it's our newest outreach in a community that doesn't have a lot of river lovers, the Santa Maria. Did you know there is a river when you go over the bridge and head south? You hardly ever see it because there's hardly ever water in it. Why?
Groundwater.
Yeah, I was adjudicated a number of years ago when I first got into this work. Holy moly.
Holds a lot back.
And Twitchell, but we're gonna see some changes there. A lawsuit settlement's going into effect, and the county water agency is currently working with the Bureau of Reclamation to start setting up what those releases will be. I'll have more to say about that in a bit. So Santa Maria doesn't have a lot of river lovers. When I first started to work in Santa Maria, they kind of yelled at me. What are you doing here? We don't have any fish. Well, it's not true. You have the Sisquoc River that is full of fish. They can't get back to the ocean and back onto the land to spawn anymore because of what we've done in terms of our ag land use. But we're working in Santa Maria now. And it really all came about due to the ag order, which is a piece of regulation from our state water board down to the regional water boards. And at the very last, this thing was going on for a decade to try to figure out how this regulation was going to come out on the landscape. And mostly and almost exclusively to large agricultural concerns in our region. And we were able to, at the very last, tack on some voluntary measures that if landowners did the various things that we're going to talk about, they could get credit and not get dinged. So the carrot and the stick business, they wouldn't get dinged for some of the bad things that happen on their lands. And so we and Central Coast Wetlands Group got together and lobbied the regional board, and lo and behold, it's actually in Ag Order 4.0 with the Irrigated Lands program. And so we're really thrilled. We haven't actually gotten to use it yet, and we're hoping that we can in Santa Maria. And so when the Rose Foundation let us know that a solicitation was going up for funding on Orchid Solomon Creek, which is the lowest tributary in the Santa Maria River, lowest meaning the most downstream. We applied for it and were awarded a bit of money to get things started. We applied for a Cal EPA and a whale tail grant too, to get a little bit more underway. And so we started water quality monitoring in the community with volunteers. We developed a very rudimentary watershed report card so that people could know what the water quality is like in the surface water. Did a bunch of education outreach, again, developing those stakeholders. We developed some curriculum focusing on the Santa Maria River estuary. It's taught in schools. What's an estuary, for God's sakes? Nobody knows if you're in public schools what an estuary is. Never mind that you have a river in your backyard, but it never has water, or hardly ever has water. We put a steelhead and watershed exhibit into the Natural History Museum in Santa Maria. Little dusty old building, go, it's a hoot. And then one of the bigger projects is the Santa Maria Habitat Augmentation Recharge Project that I'll tell you a little bit about. And it's actually related to the groundwater basin being adjudicated. It's also related to the lawsuit settlement that is coming on the scene. And so we did a lot of partnership development, stakeholders, Santa Barbara County Action Network. I've mentioned the Natural History Museum. League of Women Voters now has a water committee. Oh my goodness. These are the conservative families in Santa Maria. I mean, their names are on road signs, right? That's how old they are. Maybe that doesn't make sense to you, but when the families don't have their ranches and agricultural concerns anymore, but they're involved in developing the community, they get the road sign names after them. Ah! And probably one of my favorites, Central Coast Alliance United for Sustainable Economies. And Allen Hancock College. Got a lot going on there too. And so what did we accomplish with a little bit of money? We got that water quality monitoring underway. We produced that rudimentary report card, a little bit of outreach and education, stakeholder development, the curriculum development, and the watershed exhibit. Tim is over here in the blue shirt, and we have a Cal Poly student who actually did her, I think it was a master's degree, working with us and that's Santa Rosa Creek, not Santa Maria. Doing water quality monitoring and putting her results into her program. And on the other side of the screen is what happened on Main Street Beach in January 2023, the road into Main Street Beach was obliterated by the storm flows that you all experienced. And our water quality monitoring program went from green to red. We could no longer get into the estuary. And so our funders were very kind and supportive and willing to work with us, but we couldn't continue the water quality monitoring because we couldn't get there. But we are going to start again, we hope, with the next round of funding and educate more folks, welcome, about water quality in the estuaries. The very rudimentary watershed report card uses a US EPA tool called How's My Waterway? And we just basically scraped the Santa Maria River information and put it together for the community so they could see what the Santa Maria River and estuary water quality was. If you go to this tool, you're smart, you'll probably figure it out. But the average person, it's a little challenging to get through these kind of sophisticated search tools. So we kind of did that for them and put the watershed report card together. The lesson plans that I mentioned, this is just some examples of some of the slides from those lesson plans. And then Jeannie Sparks is down there with the SB Can table in Guadalupe, talking about the water quality monitoring program that we started with SB Can and partners. And a little bit more about the outreach and education, getting folks informed about what's going on down there. Yes, there is water, there are fish, the Sisquoc and the Cuyama meet and become the Santa Maria River. And we provided a standing room only presentation in the Santa Maria Library late last year. Kind of blew my socks off. This little dusty Santa Maria Natural History Museum had a grand opening for their steelhead exhibit. And one of the coolest things is they actually had somebody paint steelhead on the floor. And they have an ocean exhibit and the watershed exhibit. And they were literally swimming on the floor to the ocean and swimming back to, I mean, oh my God, this is great. But my favorite is a project that is going to take a long time. The Santa Maria Habitat Augmentation Recharge Project, SHARP. Because Twitchell has been holding back all the floodwaters and releasing them slowly for agriculture and also community drinking water, the altered regime of the natural flow means that there's virtually no water in the river most of the year. The way it's managed is that water is allowed to go to Bonita Crossing. And if you know that area at all, it's basically just through the ag lands. If the water goes any further than that, the ag community considers that a waste. And so they do try to manage it. The Twitchell Authority tries to manage it to prevent that waste. Now, of course, you know what steelhead need, right? We haven't really talked about fish yet, but they do need to have water to swim. Duh. And if they can't get over the critical riffle in Guadalupe, which now we think they might be able to with the lawsuit settlement and eventually with this project I'm going to tell you about, they may be able to get over the critical riffle and get back into the upper watershed someday. We just need 250 CFS for 2 days, about 1,000 acre feet. We think that will offset the Twitchell releases with what's already coming down the Sisquoc and allow for that critical riffle to be managed. And so the start of this project is basically map-based. We took a look at the upper watershed and where we thought we could start to plan a very big storage project for water that comes off of the Sisquoc. We would basically take the peak flow off of the Sisquoc. Years ago, a guy named Mike Stoker wanted to build a dam on the Sisquoc. Bad idea, in my view. It didn't happen. And then he said, well, let's just burn the whole forest and then we'll get more water out. Bad idea. We don't know if this is a good idea yet or not. The stakeholders haven't weighed in on it. We've been talking about it. We're going to talk to the county of Santa Barbara to see if they're interested. But the idea is to store the peak flow discharge that comes off the Sisquoc, not all of it, but some of it, in order to offset what is going to be required to be released from Twitchell and what we think we need to rewater the critical riffle in the lower watershed. There's a lot going on there. It's a technical project. But this is where we think it could happen. We've looked at the geology and we've looked at the stream flow. And we think that that example recharge area in those little yellow boxes may be our selection point. because then the water can spread out from there and fill the rest of the channel. The channel, by the way, is a very, very old alluvial channel that way before us would have wandered across that valley. When you drive down 101 past Nipomo and you look across the valley to the Solomon Hills on the other side, that is where the river wandered. It was huge. And I don't know if you've seen some of the old pictures from the Historical Society in Santa Maria, but the water would get up, 6 feet at Main Street and Broadway. That's why what do you call those curbs? Were 4 feet high. They're not anymore, of course, because all that's been removed because we have levees there now. But we still have more to do in Santa Maria, a lot more. We're going to continue to build capacity, characterize parcels for suitability for sharp. We hope we have a wetland treatment project to treat water before it enters the estuary and remove nitrates. We're going to continue the sharp project. We received a National Water Quality Initiative grant in association with the RCDs. And we'll be working on putting together that plan in the next year so that farmers and ranchers, if they use NRCS, which is Natural Resources Conservation Service, best management practices, BMPs, they can get funding through EQIP. And we're going to lay all that out in the NWQI report. And that report will describe the resource concerns, identifies goals, practices, and locations. And hopefully, eventually, for folks that sign up, those metrics will be collected so we can track their progress in terms of water quality improvements. And of course, a lot of outreach and education with our partners. So looking ahead in Santa Maria, we hope to bring 30% designs to sharp. The wetland treatment project is coming online. We think the landowner is interested. We're going to continue to work with the Watershed group and develop a Watershed group, perhaps through a Beaver Reclamation Water Smart grant for the entire watershed. And then finishing off this NWQI, which will also help us target a lowering of nitrates in Orchid Solomon Creek. The whole reason why the Rose Foundation came and started to fund. We're getting there. So what else are we up to? I want you to, as we go through these examples, we're going to go kind of quick. I want you to guess what the project purpose is and just shout it out. You don't have to worry about being nice and polite. You can shout over each other. We'll have fun. So what's the project purpose of what you're seeing now? Oh my God. Do you know Jesse Trace? Oh, okay, that's why. Oh, wait. Oh, hi, sweetie. I didn't think I'd see you again. And here you are. Oh, this is one of my pups, my Watershed Stewards program. Yeah, so this is a property on Toro Creek. So the Toro Creek folks might be interested in walking, driving, or otherwise getting yourself up to the Traceland area. And they are doing an incredibly cool permaculture project to rehydrate their they're not quite the uplands, but their creek has been highly incised. It's about 40 feet down. And this will be a way to have the land retain a little bit more hydration. Plus, the family is going to basically plant this out for economic development, but using species that ranchers and farmers don't usually use. So they're going to do a permaculture out here that's going to be amazing. And to watch that unfold in the next, well, for your guys, time frame, it's going to be, I'll be gone, but you guys will be going there and chomping on cherimoyas and sweet oaks and all kinds of fun things, because that's what's going to be grown there. What's going on here? You can't say anything because you know all these. What's going on here?
Fish Pass.
Yeah, fish passage. It's about an 8-foot jump for little steelies to have to make it from that pool upstream. And this is Arroyo Grande Creek, as it says. And this is a county project with the county. We are 100% designed. We have 600,000 out of the 800,000 that we need to do this project. We're going to take a chunk out of that concrete weir, lower it so that fish can jump up the height and reduce the velocity so that they can get up and over. It is a very incised creek channel, so it's very expensive to fix this problem. We've been working on it for a very long time. What's going on here?
Fish ladder?
There's a defunct fish ladder and Luigi Murray settled Avila Valley. and decided that his cows needed fresh water. And then after him, Rob Rossi decided he needed fresh water. And so this weir was placed across the creek in the 60s for a ridiculously small amount of money. I've seen the actual bill of sales that built this thing. And here it still is many, many years later. And there has been now 65% designed to fix this thing. It's a fish passage issue. The Land Conservancy worked with the decision makers a number of years ago to put in a notch in the upper kind of right-hand corner that does provide a bit of fish passage, but the designs will create the conditions where more fish will get over more times of the year. We don't know this one's going to go forward because the primary stakeholders may or may not be willing to actually make this go. So stay tuned. What's going on here? Say again? Yes, and also, anything else? It looks like a firefighter, doesn't it? But at the end of that helicopter, all the way at the bottom, you'll see some boulders. It's not close, but you see it being put together on the left-hand side. Boulders and root wads and logs were being put together to enhance the habitat in that floodplain at different elevations so that fish would have places to hide and fish bugs that fish like to eat would have places to live and prosper more times during the year. So this is the south arm of the Carmel River estuary. We work with state parks and the Steelhead Association out of Carmel and did this about 8 years ago. It was my own first and only helicopter project. I'd love to do another. They're terrifying, but they're so fun and expensive. That helicopter was almost $60,000 for about 6 hours of work. But it took a long time to get that project up and going, but great partners with the California Conservation Corps and just a super, super fun thing to do. What's going on here? It kind of says, duh. Why do we have to restore the Villa Creek estuary? You know that it is, it's in the Toro Creek area. It's Villa Creek, it's very own estuary. So it's not Toro Creek itself. It's a little bit up coast. What's wrong with it? Yeah. There's definitely levees. What else? There's roads in there. There's, basically remnant asphalt in there. Tons of material that will be removed, literally tons of material that will be excavated and removed. And this is a fish head place to go and geek out. It's a small watershed. It's only about 5 to 6 miles in length. And we think that it's one of the only ones that will be able to fully restore because there are conservation easements in the upper watershed. And so the landowners know what jewel they have. And they have put together easements with the Land Conservancy to limit the activities on their lands. And this is at the bottom of the watershed, the funnel. And then the project, or rather the creek goes through the Alexander property, 350 acres, just upstream of this parcel. And so this is a steelhead creek. It is not considered super important by the feds, but we love it. This is sort of my favorite creek, I guess, if I have to name one, it's Villa Creek.
Is there any thoughts of acquiring the parts of the land which was out there?
Yes. And I'm not going to talk about that project, but sit next to me during lunch and I will tell you all about it. Because that's one of the projects we are also working. And so here's what a restored estuary would look like in terms of a graphic representation. Backwater enhancement, pond reconnection. We've talked a little bit about floodplain reconnection, some off-channel large wood debris structures. We won't get to use helicopters this time, though. We're just going to use the CCC. And I don't mean that in a just kind of use way. They're amazing. Actually, we may not use CCC. This is a state park project, and they have to do their own kind of contracting, and I'm not sure if the Seas are going to be able to do it. Snowy plover habitat area, some additional scour to make pools for steelhead shelter along the way. So very exciting project with Stillwater Sciences, State Parks, California Conservation Corps, and funded through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. What the heck is this and where is it? Anybody know where Manzana Creek is?
Yeah, up in Santa Barbara County, it's a hike to the schoolhouse.
Okay, you've been in the Manzana. So the Manzana is a tributary to the Sisquoc. We mentioned the Sisquoc earlier as a tributary to the Santa Maria. So what's going on up there in the Manzana? Lots of recreation, lots of rural roads. And what do rural roads that aren't built correctly by the Forest Service do to water quality? Bad, really bad. And the Sisquoc is a free flowing river. Part of the river is designated wilderness. For heaven's sake, we need to do something up there to protect that wilderness water quality. Oh my gosh. So a number of years ago, we and the Pacific Watershed Associate folks assessed the highest contributors of sediment in those recreational roads. And that's all done now. We did the assessment and we're going to construction. Hopefully, if everything goes well with NEPA and cultural resources, oh my God, in the next few months, we'll be correcting some of these high sediment delivery roads in a number of ways that I won't go into a lot of detail. But this is a little bit of what the planning documents look like in terms of what we'll be doing. 13 stream crossings, armored fills, culvert installations, 1 replacement, 20 road service discharge sites. So we're going to separate the road from the waterway. So most of the time now the roads are built. So when water hits the road, it goes down and enters the creek. Well, we're going to change that dynamic and make the water go not into the creek and deliver its sediment on the land itself. And 152 rolling dips and outsloping to cover a little over 4 miles of unsurfaced roads. And at the end of our assessment, we conducted a field school so that people who work for cities and counties and the U.S. Forest Service can learn these techniques and use them in their road repair and maintenance programs. What's going on here? A lot of water. This is in an urban neighborhood in Arroyo Grande. It's called Tallyho Creek. And in 2001, it flooded many, many homes. And we, Central Coast Salmon Enhancement at the time, became involved. And I have been working on this project ever since. In 2023, 8 homes were red tagged. In March, even more, because we had a back-to-back atmospheric river experience that year. 8 households cannot go home. They don't have houses anymore. So this becomes a justice issue. And this is a relatively low-income neighborhood. So how do we address waterway in somebody's backyard that has not been maintained, but they own it? Technically, we don't own it. Well, how do we help them? What do we do? We work together in stakeholder groups to get things done. And so what we did do is prevent 2,500 cubic yards of sediment from entering into the main stem, Arroyo Grande, which is a steelhead creek. It's a core 1 steelhead creek. Planted over 300 native riparian species, removed invasives, and we developed a ton of educational content for the community. We're hosting our 2nd creek relief workshop at the end of the month to teach people how to remove invasives in their backyard, to teach them how to put natives in their backyard, literally out there with them with shovels doing this work, because we don't own the land or the water. And we repaired a head cut in this reach so that if you're not familiar with how a head cut works, when the water comes down, a nick point starts to develop for gravity and for essentially geomorphological reasons. There's rock there, and sometimes rock, sometimes not a lot of rock, and the land starts getting chewed away through the velocity of the water, and the head cut starts moving uphill. This head cut got stopped by some really cool tree roots, but it's been there ever since, and it continues to deliver sediment to downstream reaches. And so a fix was fixed for this head cut. And we hope it will keep sediment from continuing to come in, but it's a very sedimenty subwatershed. It's full of sand. It just is. That's the way, you know, it got created. And here's a couple of other images of the same upstream reach from the head cut during construction. Is this the right thing for this reach? I have some mixed feelings about it. It's a straight stream. It's really not a very pretty meandering floodplain. But how do we protect these homes that were just completely, they were allowed to build in this floodplain. The city said it was okay. We have designs that we found from 1978 to build sediment basins upstream of these homes. Did the city ever do it? No. We're going to look for money now to do it, to protect these homes. Because some came back and built it. They own the land still, even though it was inundated and their houses got destroyed. So, do I like this project completely? Well, it's got a lot of education going for it. In terms of the restoration components, oh well. What's going on here? Do you know where Escuela Ranch is? If you're a Cal Poly student? It's right here on campus. It's right next to Pennington Creek. So it's on the Chorro side of the watershed, Morro Bay watershed. And a number of years ago, a bunch of water tanks were put in to collect rainwater to service the beef unit for cow watering. And not enough rainwater filled those tanks. We evaluated the efficacy of those tanks, and lo and behold, they weren't quite doing the job that they were designed to do. So we're going to put in another couple of tanks, and we're going to take that peak flow discharge from Pennington Creek. We worked out all the details. We're not going to harm the habitat. And we're going to take that peak flow and put it into 2 more tanks that are now at 65% design, and Cal Poly is reviewing everything, and I'm working on SQL with them. And then we will hopefully find money to build them in the next year or 2. And then the cows will have all the water they need and won't have to use Pennington Creek water at all. At this point, they're still using Pennington Creek water, Cal Poly is, to water the cows in the low flood time of the year. And I haven't talked about base flow. That's a very important thing about fish. They need water, as I mentioned, and base flow is what they get left with when everybody else takes theirs. They don't get left with much, which is why beaver is so important to keep that base flow high. And on the other side of the image is something you'll probably never know is there. But as you go north on 101, and you're not quite at the grade, if you look over at Fox Hollow, don't do it if you're driving, but ask somebody else to look, you'll see a tin roof sticking out on the landscape. It's a very old part of the infrastructure of the city of San Luis Obispo's water purveyance system. It's not used anymore. It's built in the 30s. We have designs to repurpose it for rainwater harvesting and peak flow discharge capture to release that water in the low flow time of the year, again for base flow, for fish in Cuesta Park. So that there would be a pipe that goes from this structure to Cuesta Park to rewater the creek where the creek goes dry almost every year. And Freddie Adi, the city biologist, has to go and rescue them and put them back into wet water. So that's another project at about 65% design. It's such an exciting time to collect data and to begin to talk to agencies about their concerns and the unknowns. And Kate and Brock are going to talk to you a little bit about that, and probably Cooper as well. But we're at the very beginning of really integrating beaver into Central Coast ecosystems. The beaver dam analog permitting situation is at its infancy. We don't exactly know how we're going to get it done. We have to work together with the agencies to make it work. Reconnecting the floodplains in highly incised channels. 40 feet. Yeah. Beavers are great. It's not a place where we can put beavers to do what they do. It's just, I don't know what else to do. CDFW's come around. They're really coming around. They are funding these projects. They are helping with the permitting. We don't know yet how the federal overseers will take this whole process. National Marine Fisheries Service support for the Southern Steelhead DPS, which is a designation for fish and other wildlife. It's unclear. For example, when we talked about this projects that are going on in this county with Matt McGugan from National Marine Fisheries Service, he was like, I don't know, what data you got? Is this going to work? We're like, we hope so. But this is where we are. We're at the very beginning. We need to collect data from these guys that are doing the work in the field. We need to get before and after data sets to see if we can figure out how to permit these projects and rest the fears of the agencies that are responsible for bringing back and keeping steelhead on the landscape and in the waterscape. And of course, there are the ag land use conflicts that are out there too. But we know that beaver are a nature-based solution. Cooper's going to tell you more about that. So I want to thank you for your time and sit next to me during lunch if you have questions about anything I said.
We do have time for a couple questions right now. So please raise your hand and Steph, you can call on them and I'll monitor the Zoom for any questions.
Eric, we can go on and on.
The lower Santa Maria River is next to a notorious environmental cleanup that is not complete. How do those two kind of incompatibilities interface, and has it been problematic for the lower Santa Maria?
So what we do know is there's an even worse problem. Sorry, there's more bad news. The highest DDT, legacy DDT levels in the state are in the Santa Maria River estuary. The coastal San Luis RCD, so I'm going to get back to your question because it does relate. The coastal San Luis RCD is doing land treatment for DDT on the Oso Flaco watershed. So they're doing some really good technical and experimental work that we hope we can eventually use in the Santa Maria River estuary. The Chevron project, which is one of the largest on-land oil spills of diluent in the country, is still being worked on. It's not a Superfund site. The company is still, pardon? No, Casmelli is on the other side of the Solomon Hills. That's another big problem. That is a Superfund site. Yeah, this one is not. The company still owns it and is still cleaning it up, and it will take decades and decades using a steam, I don't remember the term, a steam process to do that work. Is it getting into the estuary? We haven't done the research to know. Yes. Yeah.
So the 40-foot is on the project. So is that a current reason that always that restored at one point? And is that per year?
No, of course not. 40 feet. So at one point, the elevation and the floodplains were connected. The channel and the floodplains were connected. And in some places they still are. But what happened in 1968 on Arroyo Grande Creek? Anybody know? As the community was getting bigger and bigger and agriculture was becoming more and more economically viable in the valley, what was built? We have a dam about 13 miles upstream, and it serves agriculture, and 4 or 5 different communities pay in to get that water in their water supply. And that, what do dams do? They do lots of things, some good, some really, really bad. One of the good things is they do provide water. One of the really horrible things they do is
Block steel.
they do that for sure. Anything else?
The velocity of the water.
What does that mean? What about the velocity of the water that comes out of them? Why? Scours the creek, but what comes out of the bottom of the dam? Is it water that's the same as water upstream of the dam?
No,
Why not?
no sediment.
No,
What's missing?
Sediment.
Why?
All being washed down as fast as we can go.
If it spills, the sediment will go with the water. But when the water comes from the bottom of the dam, it doesn't have sediment in it. And it has energy to do work. Right? It erodes banks along the way. It has lots of space in its water, in its energy capacity to grab the loose soil on the edges of the creek. And it does that over and over and over and over and over and again. And so the 40-foot elevation difference has gotten to bedrock in Roy Grande Creek. That will still wear, but not as quick. It's sedimentary oriented, but it's bedrock, it's rock. It's no longer alluvium. So guess what else the dam has done? It has taken away the water storing capacity of the creek. Alluvium is that loose sand around the surface area and underneath the surface area, the interstitial areas of the creek. And that's where wells get dug most everywhere else, right? You put your well into the alluvium. But if you don't have any more alluvium, where do you store the water? I'll never forget at a stakeholder meeting, and we were talking about this with the farmers in Arroyo Grande Valley, and we were talking about how the alluvium has disappeared, and I could just see the light bulbs go on over their heads because they grew up in the watershed. Their parents started farming there in the late, 1800s, early 1900s. They fished there when they were kids, but the connection, the dots were not being connected. That the dam, which made their economic picture look great in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond, led to this essentially elimination of the alluvium that stores water. And so we are talking with county and our BOR grant that we currently have with RCD to figure out how to rebuild the alluvium. There are ways to do it. It's not cheap. And then you have to manage your creek and your dam differently. Never mind getting the fish over it, but that's being worked on too.